Hey, what's up? Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am here to share the second part of my 2025 so far book haul. So today I have the fiction books that I have acquired throughout the months of 2025 with you all. As a general rule, I have really been keeping my book purchasing to a minimum for many different reasons, but in the coming months there are a lot of library book sales in my area. We're talking like 50 cents to $1 a book, and then on the last day as many as you can fit in like a paper grocery bag for $5. So if I find things that I like, I might go a little bit all out, and I'll share this with you too. But otherwise, this probably will be the only book haul you'll be getting from me for a while. So I have, I think, about 6 adult fiction books to share with you all and 5 fiction children's / young adult books to share with you. So if you're interested in that, please keep watching. Now, I do want to say that I am sitting here in front of piled books behind me, and also my desk is over here and it's just a mess of things, in large part because I have been waiting for these bookshelves to come in my area, and they are out of stock. I'm not keeping it secret. I'm waiting for the walnut Billy bookshelves from IKEA, just because I'm not trying to spend a huge amount of money on bookshelves, because I've moved enough at this point in my life to know that things get damaged when you move, and I'm not going to be here forever, and they break, and so I just want functional, strong, good-looking bookshelves for a reasonable price, and the Billy bookshelves from IKEA are that, but they again are out of stock. So I've been waiting for them to come in. When they come in, I'll finally have them, but for now we're just living this life of stacked books for a while. So we're going to start by jumping into 2 books that I recently picked up from Book Outlet, and one of them is repurchased because I bought it I think earlier this year. If not, it was late last year. And I read it, I think, earlier this year, though. And I talked about it in one of my reading vlogs, and I said I didn't like it. I thought it was overrated, and I still stand by that to some extent. But I also think I was wrong about a few things. And that book is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. And then I also picked up its subsequent book, Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. So listen, I can acknowledge when I was wrong, and I think I was wrong about this book in that I was too narrow-minded in what I was looking at and assessing it for, and I was too hasty in my judgment. I have learned this year that I get a little bit too hasty in my judgments, because the same thing happened with Tender is the Flesh by Basterica. I can't think of the author's first name, but so here's what I think of the Parable of the Sower. Okay, for those of you who don't know, the Parable of the Sower is following the main character when she is essentially like, she's a teenage girl, and she's living inside a gated community when all of the world around her is falling apart. Not falling apart in the like zombie apocalypse way, or like the world is so far from recognizable that it's crazy, although at the time this was written that might be so. But the author, Octavia Butler, very much knew about the perils of capitalism and the way that it influences our politics, and all these different things, and how they could really deteriorate society over time. And so actually a lot of the things that are happening in this book aren't that far from where things are now. Basically, everybody is so poor except for a very small few, and so there's a lot of warring factions of people. There are people who just have nothing, and then they like break in violently to these communities that have tried to come together and preserve themselves and have a little bit of something, and the main character lived in one such community until one day that's completely destroyed. And I think when I read this book, I was too harsh about the fact that, okay, when we meet Lauren, she's 15 years old, And because she's 15, she has a naivety about her. And that's okay, except for the fact that when I have heard many people talk about this book, they talk about like how like wise this book is. And I think where I might have been wrong is that I don't think people are necessarily talking about all of Lauren's views that are the wisdom, the inherent wisdom, but rather the kind of like aggregate of everything in this book. And I have heard that where this book goes is kind of almost better in a way than this book alone. And so I wanted to give this book a shot, because if this book is kind of describing the landscape in the context, this book is, from what I've heard, kind of really addressing like, okay, well, what the heck do we do in that landscape and context, which is unfortunately very relatable in these times. So I do think that my criticisms were in some ways accurate. I just don't think they were exhaustive and fair in the way that I too quickly judged, I think. So, and one thing I will say too about this book is that I have caught myself thinking about this book time and time again. And even though I don't think Lauren in this book, in all of her musings and thoughts and ideologies, to be particularly wise, I will say I have found myself at times thinking like, I wonder what Lauren would do in a situation like this. That's not nothing. Like that's something. So the fact that I've thought about this book so much, and the fact that I was interested to read this, is why I picked these up. And with it, the acknowledgement that I was wrong. The next book that I picked up from Pango Books. For those of you who don't know, Pango Books is a used book website where multiple independent sellers, sometimes there are like bookstores and things like that who also sell through Pango, but they're mainly just like normal everyday people like you and me selling their books. And when I purchased a book that I hauled in my last video, which was the Audre Lorde books, the seller also had The Color Purple on sale for super cheap. I think it was like $2. And I had actually never read The Color Purple, and I know that it's a highly revered classic, and so I decided to pick this up. This is kind of like shallow, but I just really liked this cover, and so I was like, it's cheap. I've always wanted to read it because I haven't read it. I think I once watched the movie, but I no longer remember it. I watched it when I was a child. So yeah, I will probably be getting into this sometime soon too. All right, so another book that I purchased also on Pango Books is As Long as Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katou. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the author's name. I will go and look up the pronunciation so that when I one day talk about this book, after having read it, I can pronounce it correctly. But this book is following a young pharmacy student, I think. Yeah, who is living in Syria when the rebellion and then war breaks out. And essentially it's just talking about her going about and like living her life as a young adult, and all of the life things that come with that, falling in love, friendships, building your life, but also within the context of Syria's war. And I think it also leads to some reflection on the character about like what it is like to, Salama must contend with bullets and bombs, military assaults, and her shifting sense of morality before she might finally breathe free. And so I can't remember exactly what made me pick up this book, other than that I had heard a couple people talk about it in passing and it sounded really, really interesting. And so when I saw it for cheap on Pango Books, I was like, I'm gonna get that. That's usually what I do on Pango Books. I list on there a lot, and so I'm often also browsing on there, and if I find a book in good condition for cheap, and especially if the shipping is not crazy, then I am quick to pick it up, because I love not giving my money to huge corporations and just, essentially like repurposing books. I'm looking forward to getting into this. If any of you have read this, let me know what you think. I mean, all of these really, but also this one, because I don't remember anymore what made me pick this up, like what I heard that made me say that one sounds interesting. But I'm looking forward to this, and let me know what you think. Just two more for the adult books. The next book that I picked up is Petals of Blood by, I don't know how to say his name, and I feel like it is going to be very disrespectful to not pronounce it correctly, but I feel like it's more disrespectful to not even try. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I'm probably saying that so wrong, and I apologize. I always intend to look up the names before I film these and forget until right in these moments when I feel like a fool and I feel disrespectful. But I will go and learn their names. But essentially, when I'm on TikTok, my TikTok feed is 50% extreme, silly ridiculousness. And the other 50% is highly, highly political. Surprise to probably no one who knows me or watches my videos. And so a lot of the political videos are also like political readings. Like here's a list of 10 books that you should read to learn about this, or that you should learn about more about these people, or here's like own voices books, you know. And this author is an author that has come up time and time again as being just a phenomenal writer, both I think of fiction and nonfiction. And again, this is one of those books that at the time that I picked this up, I had been learning a lot about this author and learning a lot about his books, and I was kind of stuck because I knew I wanted to read something by him, but I didn't know what to pick. And one day a TikTok creator gave a really in-depth talk about this book, and I don't remember who the creator was or what they even said, but I just remember after hearing that I was like, I need to read that book. And so again, I saw it on Pango Books. I looked for it on Pango Books, and I also found this really pretty copy of it, and it's one of those like really like soft buttery covers, you know, so but not a buttery cover that leaves your fingerprints and always makes you feel like you have oily fingers even though you don't. But anyways, so I really do look forward to reading this. A classic of modern African literature, the author's damning satire of politics and corruption in Kenya would prove the catalyst for his imprisonment by the Kenyan government. So yeah, I'm really interested in reading this, and also I think this is one of those books that I'm going to have to pair with some nonfiction research, because I always want to know the context of a story. I'm really excited for this, but I think I will have to save this for a time when I have more time and mental energy to be able to read this and research adequately alongside of it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. And last but not least, for adult literature, I have When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. I honestly picked this up on a whim. There's a quote on the back that kind of gives you a little teaser of the book, and it says, "What if we resisted further, refusing to stop? What if we clamored and yelled, fought in every way we could? And what if we weren't alone? What if it was all of us together, rising? Can you imagine it? Can you imagine what we could do?" And hello, as a person here who is, just to boil it down, like super resistance to colonization and resistance oriented. I loved that. And then there is a little description on the inside that says, "While the core of LaTanya McQueen's When the Reckoning Comes is a story of a childhood friendship set against the backdrop of generational trauma, it is also a poignant examination of the uncomfortable trend toward plantation weddings shown with macabre consequences. Confronting harrowing truths about some of our country's darkest history, long forgotten, this book is a reckoning for us all." And I think that sounds so interesting. Again, I don't know exactly what this book is about anymore because I looked it up when I bought it and now I don't remember. But I do like books that have discussions about the reality of our history, American history, and the reality of just how grotesque our history is, because certainly in this time now there's a lot of whitewashing and downplaying some of the horrors of history. You know, I've heard people describe slavery conditions, for example, as essentially indentured servitude. And, you know, sure, there were some kind of bad slave owners, but they were few and far between. Where when you actually look at the history of American chattel slavery, it was not few and far between. A lot of slave owners were horrific to Black people who they owned as slaves, because that is how they tried to quell any slave uprising and revolts. And there is so much about American chattel slavery that even I didn't know until very recently, and I knew it was a lot worse than I think like most people think it was. It's important to talk about why is it so dangerous and so unethical to water down the history, and why it is not just a passive thing to have plantation weddings, to have Confederate flags up, and to have statues of Confederate soldiers. Well, anyways, that's a rant, but yes, I am looking forward to reading this as well. And it's pretty short. It's about 200 something pages, although it is pretty small print. So we're gonna move on to a couple of children's books slash young adult books that are mostly fiction, but as I'm going through this now, I realize one of these is actually nonfiction, and I missed it in the last one, so I'll share it here. And that is Halfway There, a graphic memoir of self-discovery by Christine Maury. I recently talked about this in a reading vlog because I had read this from the library, and I thought this was a really sweet but also substantive look at identity and what it would be like for a young person of mixed race. But also I think there are themes in here that could be applied to other people, that even if it's not mixed race, but what it would be like to have an identity that's kind of confusing and that they feel like there's nowhere they belong. And especially in the work that I do, I think this is relevant. I thought this would be a nice book to have in my collection, number one, so I can remember it and use it as a reference for people if I feel like it would be relatable to them, but also so I can have it in my collection for my toddler, because even though it'll be a long time before my toddler can read at this level, I really cherish the idea of having a diverse and well thought out collection of books for her. Kind of in my own reminiscence, I found a copy of Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell, which I picked up because, again, it was pretty cheap, and I read this as a child, and I, again, don't really remember what it was about, but I really enjoyed this book at the time. I am going to read it again because I do worry. I think it does have something to do with an Indigenous young woman and as the main character, and I know now as an adult how not particularly well a lot of Indigenous people are written, so I'm hoping that this book does not disappoint me. But lately I have been really kind of wanting to read books that I read as a child, now as an adult. Like, I recently picked up some Bailey School Kids books. They're kind of hard to find, but like vampires don't wear polka dots and like werewolves don't something. I've been like looking at those, and also I've been looking for a copy of this book called The Green Book, which is I think like the first science fiction book I ever read, and I just remember loving it. And so I think I also kind of picked this up in my own it's for my daughter down the line, but also kind of for myself because I just wanted to like experience it again. I also picked up and started reading but haven't finished this book, Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing her name, I apologize, but so far this book is so good. The description is: there are no monsters anymore, or so the children in Lucille are taught. Jam and her best friend, Redemption, have grown up with the lesson that the city is safe for everyone. But when Jam meets Pet, a creature who some might call monstrous, but in reality is anything but, she must reconsider what she's been told. Pet has emerged from one of her mother's paintings to hunt a true monster, and the shadow of something grim lurks in Redemption's house. No one has encountered monsters in years, though, and Jam's quest to protect her best friend and uncover the truth is met with doubt and disbelief. Now, this book is, again, written for children, but and I honestly, I started reading this about a month ago, and I got a couple chapters in, and then I had to put it down because I didn't have time to read, because my toddler, and then consequently myself and my husband, we've just been getting sick back to back. And so when toddlers are sick, they don't sleep well. And my toddler in particular has never slept well. And when toddlers don't sleep well, the parents don't sleep well. And I've been sick, as you can probably hear in my super nasally tone. So it's been really hard to find time to read, because usually I read when she's asleep, but she's never sleeping, so no reading time, right? So I don't remember anymore why I liked this book so much, but I remember thinking like, this is kind of like brilliantly written for kids. And I think it's really like, it gives them just enough, like I think as an adult reading it, it's kind of like, you're really kind of giving this to me, you're spoon feeding this to me. But I think for kids, it's a perfect level of like, they have to reach for some things and make some connections, but it's also giving them enough to really like get them there, if that makes sense. So I really am looking forward to reading this. 2 more books I have. Each of Us is a Universe, by Jean Zulik Ferrulo, and with Ndango Gladys Molelo. I really need to work on that. I need to make a commitment to learning to say these names before. But this is about a kid who looks like their mother's fighting cancer. And they kind of like feel isolated and misunderstood by everybody around them. And then they run into another girl who seems to get her. And I think it's about their friendship and understanding themselves and each other. I don't really know. I just heard that this was like a good kind of kids book and it looked cute. So I picked this up. And the last one, I don't know anything about this. You know how, they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. You shouldn't buy a book because of its cover, which is, we all kind of do that at certain times, right? But this one was just about the cover, and I'm kind of embarrassed. The book is Puggleton Park by Deanna Kizis, illustrated by Hannah Peck. And I'm not gonna lie, I bought this book just because it had a cute and quirky, I'm looking at it right now in the camera, a cute and quirky looking pug on the front. I love pugs, which my husband makes fun of me all the time for, because he thinks that they're ugly. But I think he doesn't understand that sometimes animals are cute when they're kind of ugly, which sounds so mean. But like, pugs are cute because they're like a little ugly, which I feel bad saying, because I also know that they were bred and that way and they can't breathe. So I'm not making like an ethical statement on that. I just think that they're cute, the same way that a good friend of mine introduced me to the breed Brussels Griffins. Oh my god, they're so weird looking that they're so cute. And so I saw that this is a kid's book about a pug, and it was like $2. So I said, okay, throw that in the cart. I need to get to the certain amount to get free shipping. But it says, when Penelope darts off in Puggleton Park to chase the most dreadful squirrel in London, she discovers that she is hopelessly lost. Thank goodness she's soon taken in by the kind Lady Diggleton. But will Lady Diggleton adopt her for good? What about Lady Picklebottom, who wants to send her off to a farm? And whatever has become of Penelope's former owner? Join Penelope on this irresistible adventure in which she learns how courage, smarts, and the occasional sit and stay, I almost read that incorrectly, the occasional sit and stay can change a pup's life forever. So I'll probably read this, and look, if you all are even semi-interested, or even if one person is semi-interested and voices that to me, I will come to you with my thoughts about these kids' books, because I'm not gonna lie, when I first started sharing books and what I thought about books on BookTube or YouTube, I've always been authentic, although it's been easier for me to be more authentic as the years have passed, and I've done a lot of my own work because I'm not as terrified of having an opinion or of being perceived anymore. However, I did kind of feel an internal pressure more when I was younger and when I was newer to this all, to like read sophisticated books that are always going to expand me and grow me. And I certainly think that I do still feel that way. But also, there's nothing wrong with picking up a book about a pug and reading it just for that reason, just for the enjoyment. Did you see the way my face lit up when I saw a pug? We need more of that in this world, okay? So anyways, that is all that I have to share with you today. Please let me know if you've read any of these, what you think. Let me know if you have any suggestions for adult books, but also for kids books, because I'm really on the hunt for that. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.